So is it worth upgrading from the Samsung S9 to the S20? That's 2 generations between each phone. That's the minimum amount of generations you probably want to wait before upgrading to a new phone. If you have the last year's model such as the S10 or the Note 10, I think you should stop this video because it's probably not worth it. You don't really need to upgrade because there isn't any major changes. However, if you have an S9 or an S8, this is the video for you. We're going to dive in and see if the cameras, the performance, and the actual device has improved over 2 generations. This is not your typical review where I just tell you the specs and I say, oh, the display is amazing, you should upgrade. I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions from my day-to-day actual usage of the S20. The first thing I want to talk about is the display, and of course Samsung is known for their amazing OLED displays, so this section is going to be a no-brainer. Of course the display is going to be amazing. However, you do have to acknowledge that you're moving up from a 5.8 to a 6.2 inch display. This is significantly taller in the vertical spectrum, but you're not going to get any more horizontal space. From a practical day-to-day perspective, the extra vertical screen space is not that game-changing. If anything, you'll just get larger banner ads, and it might be more difficult with one hand to reach the notification panel. By default, the screen resolution is set to FHD+, which is just about 1080p, and I find the pixel density at 1080p pretty damn good. It's very hard for me to discern the difference between HD and QHD, so I definitely recommend just keeping it at 1080p and save your battery life. So not only is QHD+ overrated, I believe that the 120Hz display, which is one of the most defining characteristics of this display, is also overrated. If you do set it to 120Hz refresh rate, of course your animations moving through menus is going to look very slick and it's going to make the appearance of the phone appear a lot faster. However, your battery life will be decimated by this high refresh rate. Personally for me, I much rather have a longer battery life than a high refresh rate. If you set your screen to 120Hz and navigate through the menus, and then you switch back to 60Hz, it will look like night and day. However, if you just set it to 60Hz and use it for a couple hours, you'll pretty much forget the difference and your brain will naturally adapt to the 60Hz display and everything will appear just as smooth as it was before. To me, I think this feature is a gimmick and definitely not a reason to upgrade. I wish Samsung would allow us to use maybe 90Hz or a variable refresh rate so that it isn't excessively wasting battery for no reason when you're just looking at text. In their marketing, Samsung claims that their new displays emit less blue light than their predecessors. So I compared the two displays side by side and it does appear that the new S20 has less blue light than the previous models. I'm not sure if this is a placebo, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. But this is a bonus in my opinion because any blue light reduction is helpful to not disturb your day-to-day sleep. My last comment about the display is that it sometimes does scratch pretty easily if you're wiping it down, so be careful if you're wiping it down with abrasive materials. In light of the recent events of the outbreak, I'm concerned about how I can keep my phone clean without scratching the surface. Yes, I can apply a screen protector, but that's probably going to mess up with my fingerprint sensor. I'm not even sure if it's safe to use Lysol wipes on your screen display. Even though the S20 has an IP rating of 68, Samsung states that water damage is not covered by their warranty. So running my phone underwater with soap is out of the question. If you have any suggestions on this topic, please let me know in the comments. The next thing I want to talk about is the look and feel of this device. Using the S20 day-to-day feels really good in the hands and I really like the design of the device. I do miss the smallest form factor of the S9 or the S10e. What's crazy is that the display is the same size as an S9 or S8 Plus, which is crazy but maybe justifies the higher price of the regular base S20. I also enjoy the new button arrangements where all the buttons are just on one side. This makes it infinitely easier to adjust the volume if you happen to be watching videos in landscape mode. You no longer accidentally toggle the Bixby button or the power button if you're in landscape mode. Reaching the power button with your index finger is very natural and ergonomic since it's lowered towards the center of the device. The edges on the screen are still curved, although they are less curved than the previous generations. The only advantage of having curved edges is when you do a lot of swiping from the edge. This is something you might do a lot if you use the One Hand Operation Plus app a lot in order to execute gesture shortcuts from the side. For me personally, I find curved edges to be a little bit annoying because they distort the screen and bend light to make the screen extra glossy on the sides. The only change I do not like, and I think is a major downside to this phone, is the lack of a capacitive rear fingerprint sensor. They opted to use an ultrasonic in-display fingerprint sensor, which has its advantages, but as I discussed many times on this channel, it is not very accurate. It's slow to wake up the device, especially if the display is off. This is something that I really miss in my S9. The ability to use a case such that it provided a groove on the fingerprint sensor so that when you pulled the phone out of your pocket, your index finger was naturally on that fingerprint sensor and it would unlock the device instantly. In the future, I really hope that Samsung makes the ultrasonic in-display fingerprint sensor area a lot larger. From day-to-day use, I constantly miss the fingerprint sensor. Yes, in a perfect environment where you're like filming, of course you can get the fingerprint sensor to work almost 9 out of 10 times. But when you're actually using it on the field, let's say you're in a grocery store, you want to quickly unlock your phone, it's very difficult to do this because the actual fingerprint sensor size is so small. Since the ultrasonic in-display fingerprint sensor is hit or miss during day-to-day use, I've opted to use facial recognition in order to unlock my phone. It must be noted that this form of biometrics is not as secure as a fingerprint scan. I think it's an utter shame that Samsung has pushed their users to use a less secure form of unlocking their phone just to get the convenience they had in the previous S9 series. I also missed the swipe down gesture on the rear fingerprint sensor. You were able to pull down the notification shade to access your brightness, quick settings, and notifications within any app, not just the home screen, but within any app. Fortunately, I discovered the One Hand Operation Plus app, which allows you to use any type of gesture from within any app to pull down the notification panel and perform different types of actions like open custom apps. In times where screens are becoming so vertically tall, one hand operation is almost impossible. That's why I think that the One Hand Operation Plus app, officially released by Samsung, is essential for your day-to-day use. I love using my phone with one hand, being able to turn off the display, access quick settings, change volumes, open certain apps, and of course, pulling the notification panel with just one hand is an underrated feature, and I wish more people knew about this app. And yes, I'm fully aware that only on the home screen you can swipe down to pull down the notification panel, which is an obvious setting that I would enable right away. Now, on the topic of performance, I have to say, compared to the S9's, performance is almost like night and day. Everything just feels a lot snappier, and I really do appreciate the nice upgrade from the Snapdragon 865. This may be one of the main reasons why you want to upgrade in order to be more productive on your phone. Being able to open the camera app faster to capture that crucial moment is essential for my day-to-day use. However, one thing I am worried about is the limited 2 years of software updates directly from Samsung and the inevitable lag. It's funny that after 2 years, Samsung phones seem to lag a little bit more, and I'm not sure if that's a placebo or something that I'm just imagining. One thing I do want to mention was that the S9 was not slow at all from a practical standpoint. Not compared to the S20, the S9 was more than useful, and it was definitely a fast phone even for being 2 years old. Another minor improvement Samsung made in its S20 line of devices was haptic feedback. I have to report, yes, haptic feedback does feel really nice and satisfying, strangely enough to say. However, I usually disable haptic feedback because I find it annoying. Now, in terms of the battery life, as I mentioned before, if you enable the 120Hz display, your battery life will be destroyed. I do think that for this reason, 120Hz display is not worth it. However, if you set it to 1080 resolution at 60 Hz, the battery life is okay. It's pretty mediocre. I still get battery anxiety, and I'm not confident that it'll last me the whole day based on heavy usage. I feel that battery life performance is very subjective. You might be a light user or you might be a hardcore gamer on your device, so it really depends on who the user actually is. My typical day-to-day usage includes watching videos on YouTube, responding to messages, or maybe taking a couple videos or pictures. And I find that if I charge maybe once throughout the day, I can easily last a whole day. So to summarize, I find that the battery life is more than acceptable. Strangely enough, the standalone time does deplete pretty fast. For example, my battery was at 100% at 5:35 a.m. and then about 6 hours later at 11 a.m. it was down to 84. So I had a 15% reduction in 6 hours. I'm not sure if that was acceptable, but I find that the standalone performance is not very good. One thing I do want to note about charging the device is that there's fast charging and then there's super fast charging. I'm a little bit scared of using super fast charging because it might heat up the battery a lot, which will destroy the long-term life of your battery. I also find that fast wireless charging, unless you have the one with the official fan, which will turn on if the wireless charging gets too hot, I find that those types of charging devices may be harmful to your battery in the long term due to the heat exposure. One topic that is often overlooked by reviewers is the speaker performance. Unfortunately, coming from the S9, I find that the S20 speakers are a little bit of a downgrade. This is probably due to the fact that there's only a tiny hole to let sound come from the top. It definitely sounds more tinny and less bassy than my S9. However, I want to stress that the sound quality is still pretty damn good. Especially if you prop this into a case and put it in landscape or lie it flat on the table, that amplifies the sound from the rear mounted speaker. Don't worry, like I said, the sound quality is not bad and it's still pretty loud. But I wish Samsung would make an improvement to the sound quality instead of sidestepping.
I made mistakes. And a lot of enemies. His call sign's Taskmaster. He controls the Red Room. They're manipulated.
Another source of frustration is the lack of a headphone jack. Yes, it's very likely that you already have a Bluetooth headset. However, on the airplane, they don't accept Bluetooth headsets. You still have to use a wired connection. After having spent over $1,000, I really wish they would include a high fidelity USB-C to headphone adapter because the one I purchased on Amazon has a hissing background noise. I compared that cheap headphone adapter to the one that was provided in my Pixel 3, and the Pixel 3 adapter has no issues. Okay, so we covered everything I wanted to talk about except for the cameras. I saved the best for last. In this section, I will demonstrate the raw capability of the S20's triple lens camera setup and of course its microphone with uncut photos, videos, and audio. Let's get right into it. If you have a phone that's more than 2 years old, likely you don't have a telephoto or ultra-wide focal length, and this may be the factor that pushes you to upgrade. The ultra-wide and telephoto lens capture great images, but only in scenes where there's lots of light. In low light situations, they really struggle a bit due to their smaller aperture. Here's an example where the telephoto lens does not do as well as the wide-angle lens due to the low light performance. You can see that the faster aperture of f1.8 on the wide-angle lens is outperforming the telephoto lens in this situation. As you can tell, the wide-angle lens takes some great photos, and it functions pretty well as a macro lens. Here you can see that the 30x zoom is doing a pretty good job. Zooming and then taking the photo actually allows the AI algorithms to kick in and actually provide a better, clearer image versus taking a picture and then later digitally cropping in. Here's a comparison of the telephoto lens on the S20 versus the S9's wide angle cropped in. As you can tell, the telephoto lens is killing the S9 in terms of zooming. I have to say, having a telephoto lens in your pocket is very handy, especially if you're going to go on a trip and take pictures of wildlife that generally are pretty far away from you. Alright. Having that option of using an ultra-wide angle is very helpful in situations where it's very tight. Of course, its low light performance is not as good as the wide-angle lens. It's also great for landscape photography and real estate. I did have a lot of focusing issues when using the telephoto lens, but once it locked focus, the picture quality of the telephoto lens looks amazing in bright daylight. One thing I noticed when I was playing with the zoom is that there's also audio zoom, which tries to capture audio from a faraway object. I can't stress how impressed I am with the telephoto lens during daylight. It just looks so sharp and it captures really cool pictures. Everything looks more compressed than a wide angle, so you don't get that fisheye, distorted type of view. I think telephoto is going to be great for portraits. One really cool feature that you don't get on older generation phones is Super SETI, and it's a direct answer to GoPro's hypersmooth stabilization. It works pretty damn well in bright sunlight, but it only works for 1080 30 frames per second. Super slow-mo is pretty cool, but it's only shot at 720p, and it only works in really bright situations. So one big feature Samsung likes to brag about is the 8K video recording. It only records at 24 frames per second and there's no video stabilization or autofocus tracking. It is rather limited, but it's a pretty cool feature and it might be useful if you want to crop in, but personally for me, my computer can barely handle 8K rendering, so it's not very practical to use it. Hyperlapse on the S20 is a lot smoother than the S9.
Okay, so we're testing the front-facing camera at 1080. Right now it's really sunny, so it's gonna look really good. Video stabilization is enabled and you can hear some background noise. I'm also really curious to know what's the difference between the two microphones of the S9 base versus the S20 base. The only reason why I did not enable 4K on the S9 is that one, it does not support it, and if I go at 2.7K, the middle resolution, video stabilization is not enabled. One thing I want to say about all these tests is that I made sure to wipe down the camera.
One thing I'm very confused is that the S9 has a faster aperture on its front-facing camera, which allows it to perform better in low light. They both have the same pixel size, However, you can see that the S20 has nicer, more contrasty colors. Let's jump into a low light video example. This is going to give you a sense of how the front facing camera actually works in a low light situation. And I'm really curious to know, in a nice calm environment like this, which microphone sounds better. I'm just trying to hold the cameras so that they aren't up, so that the mics aren't obfuscated by my hand. So yeah, what do you guys think is the better picture quality and audio quality? Okay, so right now I've switched it to the rear cameras, and I'm just comparing like for like the rear camera. So this is just the regular wide angle, not the ultra wide or the telephoto. Obviously the base Samsung S9 only has one rear camera, and that's just a wide angle. So this is a low light situation, and let me know what you guys think is the better picture quality. How is it handling low light? I think that given that the Samsung S9 has a wider aperture at f1.5 and this one is f1.8 S20, however the S20 does have a larger sensor size, which one will win in terms of the low light performance? I have to admit, I'm a little bit disappointed in the performance of the S20's wide-angle lens. The colors did look better on the S20 lens, but there was not much of improvement in sharpness. Also, I'm shocked at the low light performance. I'm a bit worried that the faster dual aperture lens on the S9 on the previous generation may be performing slightly better than the S20's wide-angle lens. I'm really curious. Please let me know which wide-angle lens performed better. Was it the S20 or the S9's dual aperture lens? Do keep in mind, even though the S20 has a slower aperture at f1.8 versus the S9's f1.5, the S20 is supposed to perform better in low light situations due to its larger sensor size. But I'm not entirely convinced. Let's go into some more video samples. If you were not satisfied with the current set of samples, I'm going to be posting another video which includes more video and image tests comparing the S9 versus the S20. I admit I really do enjoy my S20 except for the terrible fingerprint sensor. However, I would not pay full retail price for this smartphone. It is just too expensive. Luckily for me, I pre-ordered the device and I got some decent discounts. If you're curious about how pre-order discounts work, check my video where I talk about 3 reasons why I could not cancel my pre-order. If you have an S9 and you don't need the ultra-wide or telephoto zoom lens, I definitely recommend waiting for the next generation because I find that the improvements over the S9 to be rather negligible, and in some cases they are downgrades. Anyways, that's it for this video review of the S20 in comparison to the S9. If you like this video, definitely give a like. It took a lot of hours to create it, and click the subscribe button if you want to hear more tech related reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.